what does it take to match at Harvard? Every time I talk to some IMGs, they have this, I'll have people from different countries that would text me or email me with, these great plans. I want to go to Harvard. I want to go to Mayo Clinic. I want to go here. And so now that we have someone who has passed through there, can you give us some tips and tricks, advice? What do you think works for the Ivy Leagues?
It's funny because I was not even going to apply there. The little imposter syndrome was over my shoulder, and I had my application ready to go, and it was my husband who said, "I don't see Harvard on this list." And I told him, "Well, they're not even going to look at my application." And he said, "Well, why not? You worked so hard for this. You're already applying to all the other Ivy Leagues. Why you're not going to add Harvard?" And I did add it, and it ended up being my number one choice and exactly where I matched. And I think it not only for Harvard, but for any other Ivy League, it's all about the work you put in and how you present and communicate that work.
If you are an international medical student or graduate looking to take your career to the next level, by ditching the feeling of being overwhelmed and intimidated by the residency application process, you need the support and guidance that I have to offer you. And I want to tell you exactly how I can do that. I'm offering my comprehensive program that includes online coursework as well as cohort group coaching with community support to help you achieve your goals and succeed when you apply for residency this year. So my program is led by myself, Nina Loom. However, I do have other experienced medical professionals who've walked in your shoes, and they understand the specific challenges that we as IMGs face. With my guidance and support and coaching, you'll navigate this complex process of preparing an application that attracts residency interviews. You'll also learn to build your network and gain the confidence and skills that you need to succeed. Free information like I provided on the podcast is great. However, the rubber meets the road when it comes to implementation. Let me hold your hand and walk you through a process that is guaranteed to bring you results. I cannot wait to see you on the other side. So join now at imgroadmap.com. The IMG Roadmap is the only podcast dedicated to coaching international medical graduates in success blueprints for this unique pathway. I am Dr. Nina Loom, your host, a previous IMG turned hospital medicine physician, healthcare administrator, speaker, and coach. I empower, encourage, and equip you with actionable steps that you can take towards the residency position of your dreams. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IMG Roadmap podcast. I have a special guest for us today, and I would like for her to introduce herself to us. Dr. Banks, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here today, Dr. Loom. I'm a huge fan of the work you do, and I hope this gets everywhere. Dr. Angela Banks Paulino, I am a Dominican IMG, born and raised in the Dominican Republic, where I went to medical school at UNIVA School of Medicine. I graduated in 2016, applied to the match in 2017, and entered my dream specialty in internal medicine in 2018. I finished my residency in 2021, went on to fellowship at the Harvard Interprofessional Fellowship for Palliative Medicine, and now I'm practicing as an internal medicine physician and a palliative medicine consultant in May. So really honored to be here today, and hopefully we can get people motivated to follow their dreams too.
So awesome, Dr. Banks. Thank you for sharing that perspective, because that helps us, get an understanding of who you are and where you've been. So as you mentioned, I'm just going to say this again, because I think maybe your volume was a little bit down, which is fine, because moving forward, I'm sure you can adjust that. But you're graduated from UNIVA School of Medicine in the Dominican Republic and pursued internal medicine and matched, and then pursued a fellowship in hospice palliative medicine at Harvard, and now practicing, sort of living the dream life, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's amazing. That's the kind of story we like to hear, is everything is great now, but it wasn't always that way, correct? Like, it wasn't always perfect. So usually on the podcast, I like to ask people to, maybe tell us a little bit more about their journey through the USMLE process. When did you start that process?
decided that I was actually going to pursue the, how we call it, the American dream around 2015, 2014. So the last 2 years of medical school. And it was not until I graduated that I actually sat down and prepared my boards. So it took me about a year and a half, I would say, to take step one, step two, CSCK, and then apply to the match. So 2016 was the year that I decided to go for it.
Wow. So you started 2016 while you were still in medical school. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. What year of medical school were you at that point when you chose to start?
That was my last year.
Okay. So final year.
Mhm.
And so you took step one first, I assume, while you were
Yes.
still a med student, and then step two. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So I started preparing maybe 4 months before graduation from medical school.
Okay.
Graduated, took another 3 months, and then sat down for step one.
Okay. All right. No, that makes sense. And then from that process, you passed step one, gave you a little bit more confidence to keep moving. Were you practicing right after medical school in the DR, or what were you doing simultaneously with your USMLE prep?
I decided to take a few months to finish my prep for step one. So, like I said, 3, 4 months after graduation of just dedicated study time at home, prepping for my boards. Once I took step one, which was the end of 2016, I started working as a general practitioner in order to get my Dominican license as a physician.
Okay.
And at the same time, prep for step two CS and step two CK.
Nice. Nice. And what were the challenges that you came across while you were studying for these exams? I'm assuming you were studying for them while simultaneously working
Yeah.
your DR license, and then also, living in a different country and pursuing this process as well. So how were you able to balance it all?
Yeah. So I think the first challenge I encountered was being the first doctor in my family. So not having a blueprint on what to do and how to go about the boards and applying to the match. So just getting information and the overwhelming amount of information that's out there, just in the right resources, trying to find trustworthy people that actually went through the process was a bit challenging as a Spanish IMG. Then the finances part. It's a costly process. Each board, it's around 900, $1,000+. So that's why I was working, not only to get my license, but also to create a little bit of money to be able to cost these expenses. And then being able to sacrifice in a way, free time and independence that I could have from being a physician to actually sit down and study a little bit more to get these boards under my wing was also challenging, right? There's always something to do. There's always errands to run and people to help and time to spend together with family and friends. But I was very determined to apply as soon as I can to the match.
Right.
So I decided to, commit my time to study and work and get this done as soon as I can.
No, I mean, it sounds like you thought things out from a very early stage, and you started planning way, way ahead of time, both financially and mentally, and obviously academically, because, I think a lot of times I hear from some IMGs who sort of stop everything they're doing to pursue this, when instead they should be sort of doing both simultaneously, like with one another. Just because, one, you want to have a plan B should an event where you don't, complete in the time frame that you put for yourself. You can practice wherever you're located by getting your local license. And then
absolutely,
it gives you time to sort of pace yourself and sort of take your time with it, because there's really no rush. Like, the programs are not going anywhere. Nothing's changing. I think we're always on this time clock that we have for ourselves in our career. And so we tend to rush things, which can, cause mayhem when it comes to your performance on boards when you're trying to rush through. So let's segue into USMLE preparation. As a graduate from a medical school in the Dominican Republic, I'm pretty confident that medicine is the same everywhere, but testing is different in different countries. So talk to us about your USMLE prep strategy, what you use, how you performed and such.
Yeah. I was very fortunate to go to school that emulates a lot of the American education system. So early on, we were exposed to clinical scenarios and, in a way, question banks to open our minds and expose us to the American healthcare system if we wanted to go that route. And that is not the norm for most medical schools in the Dominican Republic. So I was really fortunate to that. And I went to that school. That was my dream school with a scholarship. So I'm always grateful to have had that education because that's where I learned from the US healthcare system and educational system in a way. Once I was exposed to that, I said, well, all my books are in Spanish, right? It's the same medicine, but it's a bit outdated, right? Because it's not how knowledge is being transmitted to the world. It's in English. So early on, I started to buy the books that I knew were high yield based on my research about the process, right? So get my first aid when I was doing my basic sciences, do questions early on to understand how the content was going to be asked instead of just going passively around the material, right? A lot of times I talk to students and they tell me I've read 10 books and it's been 5 months and I did a question bank or I did a self-exam and I flunked. And I asked them, did you do any question tests? And they say no. And it really blows my mind. If you think of a marathon and you're going to run a race, you want to race every day, right? You want to go for a jog and you want to test the waters. And it's sadly not the norm for a lot of IMGs. So early on, I knew I need to do questions and I need to do them often and as much as I could in order to sit comfortably for the test. I think that was really a plus for me to do as many questions as I could.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I just made that same analogy yesterday while interviewing Randerson Cardoso, who is a cardiologist out of Harvard as well. And we were talking about USMLE preparation. And one of the things that I mentioned was nobody starts a marathon by just starting off to run, right? Like you
Right.
actually take time to run at home on the treadmill, then run outside and you practice over and over again. You do what you're going to do on test day over and over again. And that's sort of a gap that I've seen as well in coaching IMGs, that there is a misunderstanding of how to prepare for it. And this is, yeah, you're right. There are a lot more modern medical techniques being applied here. Obviously, it's in the English language. And then in addition to that, it's a different kind of test. It's a different kind of beast. And you have to come prepared. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So do you want to talk to us about your internal medicine application? How did you prepare for that? How did you process through that? Walk us through your plan.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. When I started studying for step one, I thought that I was going to apply to surgery because that's the clerkship I did. I did 2 months of surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York during my third year of medical school. And when I went to that clerkship, I thought that that was my passion, right? And I learned as much as I could, and I got letters of recommendation. And it was really eye-opening. And it was my first experience with the US healthcare system. And I really grew, I think, as a person and as a professional from that experience. But also internally, I realized that that was not the specialty for me. I have a lot of respect for the surgical field, but it's not the lifestyle that I wanted for myself. And that's what I learned from that experience. And when I came back home, I then did my internal medicine clerkship and realized immediately that this is what I wanted to do. And it was kind of too late for me to do another clerkship because I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to apply a year after graduation and no longer than that. And I had already set up my Dominican internship. So I was really tight on time to squeeze in another rotation. So I knew from early on, this might look like a red flag because you're applying to internal medicine and you have a surgery clerkship and surgery letters of recommendations. So I knew that I had to address that early on. And I was very strategic about talking about that experience in my personal statement and researching programs that would value the knowledge that I acquire from that experience. I knew that I spoke English, that's Spanish, sorry, that's my native language. So researching programs that had a very large Hispanic population to serve looked like a plus to me because that's, a population that I could serve and that I'm passionate about. So it's going to be easy to talk about what I could do for that community during my interviews. And like I said, just knowing what my strengths and my weaknesses were and how to communicate how my life experiences served me to be the ideal candidate for these programs was what landed me several interviews. I applied to, I think it was 105 internal medicine programs throughout the state, and I got 14 interviews. So I felt really, really grateful to have that balance from applications and interview ratio.
In regards to your USMLE preparation, one of the things that I hear from IMGs is they don't get as many interviews. They don't get, on average, anything over 10 is considered to be, more than what is expected. A lot of IMGs end up getting under 10 interviews. So what would you say in your case maybe influenced the fact that you got more? It sounds like, one, you had a strategy where you sort of were only seeking to sell what you had to offer to programs that were in locations that had a huge Spanish speaking population, because obviously it would be much easier if they hired a resident that would not require an interpreter for 3 years and a population that would be easy to communicate and relate with for 3 years. So that's definitely, I think, one key strategy that I can, listening to your story, I can say that's definitely one way that you leverage what you had to offer. And then, the other thing I know a lot of people always worry about, how do I get more interviews? STEP performance is another key area. Performing well on your examinations. And by well, I mean competitively, historically over 240 or so, because that just makes people stand out. Yep. So can you share with us right now you've finished residency, you went into fellowship at a really great institution, and then you're practicing, and you can probably look now with the 360 lens and say, here's what I think maybe influenced how many interviews that I got. And what will you say those items are?
So definitely knowing where to apply and what the requirements were for that. So I didn't waste any, I did not waste any application for an interview, right? Because it's money that I didn't have. So when I looked at every program that I was going to apply, I really needed to feel confident that I knew what they were looking for and that I had that. Number two, I would say networking, right? I searched throughout the US, where is a Dominican IMG practicing that I might have a connection to or that knows someone that I know. And then just ask them about the program and ask them if they thought I should apply and connect that way. And even if I didn't get an interview, that could be a potential friend and that could be a potential place where I could apply for fellowship in the future. So reaching out, networking, and knowing how to do that in a respectful and professional way, I think really paid off as well. Performing well in my boards. I got 238 on step 1, passed my step 2 CS first attempt. CK, I think it was a 240. So good to be in the pool for internal medicine applications for sure. I had research experiences in the Dominican Republic. I had a lot of volunteering experiences in populations that were potential patients, if you look at it. So I volunteer in diabetes fairs and hypertension fairs, and I went to help in my local community hospital in my hometown. So I think when I look at it, I had a well-rounded application that did not just focus on medical knowledge or only on research experiences, but rather, just a decent human being who wants to serve others, who has the knowledge and has the attitude to do what she intends to do. So I think that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a key area. You said something that sounds so simple, but very true in the sense that being a well-rounded applicant, it's not one cookie fits all. It's about portraying certain traits and characteristics in the experiences and events that you have participated in that display your interest and commitment to that specialty that you're applying into. So whether that is all the community work that you did or the volunteer work that you did and sort of how you spend your time in dedication to reaching and fostering that particular specialty that you applied into, I think that's the key in showing a well-rounded application. And on the flip side, I have a lot of students who would also spend a great deal of time in extracurriculars when those should be sort of like the cherry on top, right? Like they should be in addition to a good performance on STEP, in addition to strategy with application, in addition to networking, then there is that cherry on top of I have XYZ extracurriculars that would foster the picture that I'm trying to paint. It will make me look even better to that ideal primary care or internal medicine program. So I definitely agree with you 100% on that plan. I can see how you perceive that now as things that could have influenced your match, because they absolutely definitely did. So let's move a little bit into, you started in 2016. Did you match on the first attempt? I mean, was it always like everything just went easy, or how was that for you?
I mean, looking at it, it went easy because yes, it was the first attempt, but it was a lot of work. It was taking all my boards within that year and a half time frame. I got my step 2 CK score like a few weeks before September. So I was really, really counting on things to work for my plan A to get my score, upload my score, and be able to hit that apply to programs by September 15. And if it didn't, then I knew that I had my plan B of working in the Dominican Republic and gathering more experience. It was not easy, but it did went smoothly in terms of applying on time and getting all my interviews and matching on my first attempt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think even for those who match on the first attempt, which I did, but it's still not easy, right? Like it's not going through the same anxiety and you're tremulous and wondering what the future holds. So you don't get to not experience, the pain of, and even American medical students will tell you the same thing. Like they're nervous. Like it's just part of the human experience for those of us who chose to be physicians and pursue this path. And as hard as it may seem, it's really important that we maintain a certain mindset that allows us to flourish in spite of. So no matter how difficult the season may seem, you need to have something to look forward to and something that can keep you grounded. So how were you able to cope through those various challenges? And I asked this question because when we send our intake form, we asked you, what are some challenges that you've overcome? And you said racial discrimination, finances, visa waiver. So can you give us some perspective of those and how you have worked through them?
Yeah, and I think it's so important for you to ask that because mental health is so important. And we're talking about potentially leaving your home country behind, moving to a different country, different state, possibly not knowing anybody, going to intense medical training. You have to have something that brings you joy other than caring for patients. You have to have and know your why. And knowing my why, it's what helped me overcome any how that I encounter. So my family, it's my number one thing. It's what keeps me going every day. So whether it was step prep or applying for the match, whenever I felt like I was overwhelmed or anxious or confused or even just scared about what the future would hold, I would just think of them and just know that if I was able to achieve this, I was going to be able to provide for them. I was going to be able to care for them at a whole different level than what I could do if I stayed in the Dominican Republic. So thinking about my why always gave me the motivation to keep going and maintaining that connection. So even though I moved to a different country and I'm in a different state, finding my roots, being able to talk back home, being able to nourish my friendships here in the States and across different other states was really important. Finding time to exercise, finding time to go on dates with my husband. It's, those little pockets of time that if they're well invested and they're full of quality, they make all the difference. There's no way you can do this if you're only thinking about, study 24 hours a day or step, match every day. You have to have time for you and you have to nurture yourself and your soul because you can't pour if you're empty.
Oh, absolutely. You can never pour from an empty cup.
Yep.
That is 100% true. And so when you completed residency and moved on into pursuing fellowship, was there still that IMG cloud over you, so to speak? Or do you think that sort of went away with having obtained residency training?
So for fellowship, I think it was very different now that I was already within the US healthcare system. I had my letters of recommendations from my residency and providers that I had worked with. I still feel like there were challenges definitely during the interview process. And I think back at it when I interview at some places, and I was the only Spanish speaking Latina doctor that was interviewing for this position, where most of the population would not be from my demographic category. And I wonder how that played. But I was very fortunate to match at a place where diversity was valued. And it really felt like the first time that I felt that I was looked at as an individual and really considered for my traits beyond of what I looked like. That was not the case all the time, especially during residency. And that's why I told you about challenges with racial discrimination. Sometimes patients saying things like, I don't want someone who was not born in this country taking care of me, or someone who did not train in this country to take care of me. And sometimes that was hard to hear. But overall, I would say the vast majority of my patients' interactions have been really good. And most of the time, people are very grateful, especially now that I'm in a rural area of a state that I had never thought about working at. 9 out of 10 times, patients are just grateful to have a caring provider that's here to do the work. But it does takes a lot of you. And I feel like knowing who you are and what you can offer, it's what puts you aside in terms of the job search and the work that you can do. Now, the waiver process, that's a different beast.
Right.
That was harder than what I thought it was going to be, especially because I was looking into palliative medicine positions. And it's just hard. I did get a lot of interviews. I talked to a lot of people that was very excited to hire me, but they didn't know a lot about the process. And I was just not about risking all the work that we put in to, see what happens. So that's why I ended up going for something secure with internal medicine, and then a little bit of palliative medicine in the mix.
And I think the key there is you have to also, remember that you'll have your entire career to practice hospital palliative care, if that's what you solely practice. And 3 years in this medical unserved area, it does come to an end. Like, I remember when I started my waiver, it was like, it would never end. Right. And mind you, I was in a facility where people appreciated me. They appreciated my work. My patients were phenomenal. The hospital was very supportive. I was working as a hospitalist there. It was great. And I had deferred my fellowship plans till later in life because I just wanted to get my visa out of the way, my waiver out of the way. That was my personal preference. And so it's one of those things where I think, in the thick of it, it looks like it's never going to end. But just to give you reassurance, I don't know if you were looking for reassurance or not.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
It does come to an end. Like, oh my gosh. There were some days I would just be like, how much longer? And it's not like my life wasn't great. It was just the idea that there was something looming over my head that I had to finish. It just put an unnecessary pressure on me. And then at some point, I think probably about the end of my first year, I decided I'm going to just enjoy this. I'm going to take advantage of everything that this opportunity is offering me. I was living in Kentucky, like in Appalachian, Kentucky at the time, and the cost of living was really low. And so I was like, I first started living outside of that city because I didn't want to live in a small town. And then I moved over there. I realized I was saving so much more money. I was able to pay off my debt, help my family do several things that we would not have otherwise been able to accomplish back home. And I started dawning on me, like, you can just enjoy every moment until the green card comes, and you can go practice whatever you want afterwards. So for anyone listening, it does come to an end. It surely does. So I know some people are going to have this question for you. They're going to want to know, what does it take to match at Harvard? Every time I talk to some IMGs, they have this, I'll have people from different countries that would text me or email me with, these great plans. Oh, I want to go to Harvard. I want to go to Mayo Clinic. I want to go here. And so now that we have someone who has passed through there, can you give us some tips and tricks, advice? What do you think works for the Ivy Leagues?
It's funny because I was not even going to apply there. The little imposter syndrome was over my shoulder, and I had my application ready to go. And it was my husband who said, I don't see Harvard on this list. And I told him, well, they're not even going to look at my application. And he said, well, why not? You worked so hard for this. You're already applying to all the other Ivy Leagues. Why you're not going to add Harvard? And I did add it, and it ended up being my number one choice and exactly where I matched. And I think it, not only for Harvard, but for any other Ivy League, it's all about the work you put in and how you present and communicate that work. There's really no point in doing 20 research and publishing all over the country and going to 100 conferences if you're not able to communicate why is that meaningful. I think I did very, very well.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Like, it's not about more. More does not equate being better.
There you go.
It never does. It's about the quality of the little that you do.
It never does. I started my internal medicine residency thinking I was going to do cardiology. Halfway through, I found palliative medicine. I fell in love with it. Then the pandemic hit, and I found myself providing end-of-life care and having all this serious illnesses conversation and really caring for the very, very sick people. And that's where my passion was. So I had to find I had to think on how do I make the most of the time that I have left to show that this is what I want to do. And I know that it's not going to be by doing 20 research on palliative care because I don't have the time, nor I think it's going to make any difference. Right. Yes. So I really invested time in doing electives in the field, as many as I could at different places. I talked to as many people as I could. I did a few research and I tried to publish them in really important journals, but it was not honestly, it was not even 5, right? It's what I could do that I thought would really be impactful and that I could talk about in my interview because I'm passionate about it. Yeah. I connected to the people I interview with. And most of the time we just talked about me, my life, the things that I enjoy doing and why I thought Boston would be a great place for me and my family. And when I saw how they received that and how the institution was looking for that diversity and was looking for people that were committed to make a difference, then I went for it. But I was, with me, my class was, with someone who was from Guatemala and someone who was from North Dakota and someone from the Carolinas. But again, it was more about the people and what did these people have to bring than a 10-page long resume.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's something to be said about, first of all, believing in yourself. But then beyond that, it's not really just about believing in yourself, because sometimes we don't always believe in ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't wake up every morning feeling super confident. But even when you don't feel confident, the bigger, more important thing is taking risks. And I think that's what I hear in your story is not wanting to put that application out because, well, we're an IMG, what do I know? I won't. There's always somebody else better than me that could get that position. And that is true. That would always be true for everyone.
That would always be true.
Even Correct. For the most brilliant Harvard grad, there will be someone who gets passed up for a job.
That's
so true. When you remember that, then you're able to say, even though I don't feel confident, even though I don't feel capable, even though I don't feel competitive, even though I don't feel up to par, I will take that step and put that application out and take the big risk. What do I have to lose? Application fee, maybe? But beyond that, what do you really have to lose? And I think that risk taking is probably the key thing that IMGs need the most. And I know it's hard because we're getting inundated with all the negative press and all the reasons why we shouldn't try. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, unless you just take the risk, like it's like having a blindfold on and just walking down the street. Unless you take that risk, you don't see any results. And I think that's what I hear in your story is like being able to take the risk in spite of what the potential was in your case. And there you are, finally getting that opportunity to train there at Harvard and graduating and then still having challenges. And that's the thing. You'll take a risk and you'll still have another challenge.
You'll have another challenge.
You'll have another problem that comes up later on. But that's just part of life. But what I know for a fact, and I believe in the Bible, and it says when you go through something one time, you're getting strength for the second time. And I can't remember the specific part where that is. It's a proverb of some sort. I am obviously quoting or paraphrasing. But when you experience a certain amount of disappointment, pain, discomfort once, it just makes it to where the second time around, you have more grit, you have more tenacity, you have more integrity to go through the emotions of that second trial. And surprisingly, you'll do a lot better than you did the first time. So, yeah. So thank you for coming on the podcast, Dr. Banks. How can IMGs connect with you?
My Instagram is out there. Anyone can shoot me a text. It's Dr.Banks. And you can find my other social media through that page.
Awesome. So we'll have your Instagram handle in the show notes for anyone who is, whether you're Spanish speaking or non-Spanish speaking and you want to connect with Dr. Banks, she'll be happy to connect with you via Instagram. So do check her out. Again, her information is going to be down below. And guys, if you are listening to this episode and you agree with all that we're saying, please give us a 5-star review. Like, there is absolutely no point to listen to a free podcast and then not even review it, right? I know I'm getting into some people's shoes tonight, but give us a 5-star review. Like, it's as easy as the stars at the bottom of your phone on Spotify or Apple. It just helps other IMGs get this message and hear about it and put in the effort as they continue to, figure out their own medical career journey in the US. So that's all I'm asking of you today. I haven't asked of anything. There are no ads on the podcast. All we're asking is for a review. So please do that for us today.
Go.
Any final words, mantra, success tips that you want us to remember?
Make sure you take care of your mental health. There's nothing you can't do. If others did it, why can't you? I used to think about that all the time. And you just have to be able to sacrifice at any time who you are now for who you're going to be. If you can do that, you're going to get where you dream to be. I just want to thank you for having me here today. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. I wish I had something like your podcast and your resources when I was preparing, because it can be really cloudy and it can be really overwhelming. And I think the job you do really makes a difference. So thank you for everything you do and for having me here today.
It is my utmost pleasure to have you, and I wish you nothing but the best. Do let me know how the waiver process goes. I'll be glad to have you come back and we could talk all things visa at that point. I think that would be a great topic.
We'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll plan for that. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next episode. Look at you. I'm so proud of you for listening until the very end. And because of that, you deserve a reward. And I want you to go right now to drninaloom.com and download any of my free ebooks, whether it's for electives or clinical rotations, or even just whatever trials come your way as you navigate your IMG journey. Stay tuned for another episode coming up next.